Tonight I'm trying something crazy. Powering a Game Boy with nothing but a candle. Here's my first attempt. All I'm getting are these flickering lines on the Game Boy screen. And before I can even adjust anything, the setup starts to catch fire. Hang on. So how is this even supposed to work? The light from a candle actually carries about the same amount of energy a Game Boy uses, but solar panels are far too inefficient for this to work, so light just doesn't cut it. But that got me thinking, because candles produce far more heat than light, this candle idea should actually work, and heat is the key. I need heat, maybe too much, but controlled or not, I need that flame to make this work. To turn all that heat into electricity, I'm using a curious little device called a Peltier module. Normally these are used in small portable coolers. They get cold without any moving parts. To demonstrate, if I put power into this module, one side gets cold, while the other side gets hot. But if you reverse the process, that heat flowing across the module will produce electricity instead. Watch this. You can see a small voltage on this meter just from me putting the heat of my hand on one side of the module. This is called the Seebeck effect. It's how spacecraft like the Mars rovers generate power. Though instead of a candle flame, they use heat from radioactive plutonium.
Plutonium! Plutonium.
I don't have any plutonium handy, so I'll have to use a candle. Hopefully that's also a little safer. For the hot side, I'm using a small black heatsink to soak up the candle's heat. On the other side, a much larger silver heatsink to help keep that side closer to room temperature. With these thermal pads that I'm putting between each surface to help conduct the heat through the module. This is the full stack that generates electricity from the heat. I just need to find a way to mount this above a candle. I've decided to use a small cardboard box with a section cut out to fit the Peltier module through. The idea is simple. Trap as much heat as possible around the black heatsink inside the box. Keep the silver heatsink outside as cool as possible, and electricity should flow out. I'm going to hold the whole thing in place with wooden stilts and pray. Hopefully this setup is safe and doesn't get out of hand. The Game Boy has no batteries, of course. Instead, it's connected directly to the module via its power jack, with a voltmeter in between, so we can measure how well this stack performs. Alright, after warming up for a bit, the meter reads about 2.5 volts. But when I turn on the Game Boy, it immediately drops below 2 volts. That's not nearly enough. A Game Boy needs at least 3 to 4 volts, with enough current to get sufficient power. Instead, all I'm getting are a few flickers on the screen, which means I need more energy. Though I have to be careful, Peltier modules are delicate. Add too much heat, say just over 120 Celsius or 250 degrees Fahrenheit, and they can burn out instantly. I tried to get up there, but it's just not working. Also, one of the wooden stilts catching on fire didn't help. Okay, it's time for a redesign. I have 2 of these modules. If I put them side by side and wire them up in series, I should get more power. I guess that means I need a bigger cardboard box and a longer black heatsink to put inside. I also have 2 silver heatsinks to put on top. And yes, I'm still using the wooden stilts. I clearly haven't learned my lesson about safety. Initial tests show I can get to about 3 volts, but it drops to 2 under load. This is not even close to doubling the power that I was hoping for. Right, desperate times call for desperate measures, and I can already hear some of you yelling at the screen, so I'm switching to thermal compound, even though it's going to make a mess. I really wanted to avoid using this, but here we are. I'm getting just above 3 volts now though, and I've discovered that moving the candle around helps even more. 3.5 volts, 4 volts. So I've decided to use 2 candles, because this seems to be working better when the heat is being spread around more evenly across both modules. Okay, I'm getting 4 volts, 4.5 volts, and climbing, and there it goes. Game Boy is now powering up. Finally, a candle-powered Game Boy, and I can play some Castlevania. It works, but this isn't the experiment I wanted. The lesson I've learned from this attempt is that the more evenly the heat is spread across the modules, the better it performs. But I'm just not completely satisfied yet. That one candle puts out a lot of heat, enough to burn out a module if I'm not careful. That should be enough energy, and I was getting close before, so let's really push it. I'm going back to a single Peltier module, but this time using thermal compound conducting the heat. I also have a single candle that this time is taller. The flame sits much closer to the black heatsink. It's maybe too close. There's a lot of soot going everywhere. But the heatsink is getting extremely hot. Smoke is really coming out now. And there it goes, running the Game Boy on a single candle. It turns out the hardest part is dealing with the initial surge of current required by the Game Boy when it first turns on. Once the Game Boy is up and running, the candle doesn't need to be scorching, just a steady flame. I'm able to play for several minutes. The final limiting factor is the top heatsink. As heat builds up, it slowly warms because this is only passively cooling. For a longer runtime, a more efficient passive heatsink would help, or maybe a very low power fan. But there it is, fire, our oldest technology from the ancient past. A small flame, but with enough power to fight all those monsters in the dark. I want to thank all my backers and supporters. You make this channel possible. Without you, I wouldn't be able to almost burn my house down. But that's it for now. Until next time.